I'm sure you have lots of questions. If you're burning to ask a question, put your hand up now. Otherwise, I'll kick off with my own here. Here we go, yes.
I thought I'd go first.
Yes.
I read somewhere that there was a proposal to do a Hollywoodised biopic of Bernadette with Sally Hawkins in the lead role. Is there any substance to that?
I'm not the one to ask. There is.
I believe Bernadette herself said she found the whole enterprise to be horrible.
Yes, Bernadette would be opposed to that. I think if you looked at the media section there at the beginning, it would give you some idea of the way in which she would view the creation of an image of her rather than the attempt that I've made, that we've made, to present something that is nearer perhaps to some kind of truth.
Actually, that just leads me to something perhaps it'd be good to talk about. Because you've been at RTE, you've been at the Abbey Theatre, and now this documentary. Why did you decide to make the documentary about Bernadette?
Because I didn't see Bernadette figuring in any of the discussions that happened after the peace process began. And I wondered where she was. Yeah, and you were right. And I was telling some students this afternoon in St Mary's College in Twickenham about that a friend decided to throw a party in Galway for her then as a sort of a we remember that you were there, Bernadette kind of event. And she came down to it, and quite a few, poets and writers and musicians and generally, ruffians were there. and she came with Michael, her husband, and some neighbours and friends, and it was a great night, great fun. And that was the time that I suddenly thought, yeah, maybe she'd be agreeable to having a documentary about what's been driving her all these years, what has, been the engine of her thoughts and ideas and motivations and her incredible witty insight into things. So that's what started me off. And she said, yes, all right, no private things. And she said one thing, I'm not going to do any walking. And I thought, okay, no walking. As you can see, she's sitting down the whole time in all of the contemporary stuff, which Joe Comfort shot, old friend of mine, great filmmaker. And we did all of that in my house, mostly all of it. And one piece, the stuff where she's in that awful yellowy, greeny thing with the hair brown. She was in a rage that day, and she didn't really want to do it. But in the course, she is so naturally interested in ideas that she cannot help herself. So the moment you get going, she responds. She's like a greyhound coming out of the traps, really is. Anyway, sorry.
I'd just like to congratulate you for doing it in the first place, because she's quite heroic.
She's a great woman.
Having said that, it must have been quite a job. A huge amount of archive,
yes,
organisation.
Yes.
How long did it take?
Well, she said yes in '98, and I didn't get around to really doing the first of the interviews with her until 2002. Myself and Margot Harkin, who's a filmmaker from Derry, who has done some wonderful work. I don't know if you've seen Bloody Sunday, A Derry Diary, her film. And she also made a wonderful first feature called Hush-A-Bye Baby, many, many years ago. It's a feature film. But she and I decided that we would try to cover Bernadette and Tony Wedgwood Benn and Johnny White on the, would have been the 40th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And I had done some camera work here and there, and Margaret had done some camera work here and there, and we borrowed a couple of cameras and VHS recorders, and off we set, and the whole thing happened in Derry. And we made the biggest bags of it you ever saw in your life. The event itself was great, and Tony Wedgwood Benn, of course, welcomed all the people from MI5 in the audience. That caused a great laugh. But Margot's camera was running on mute, and my camera was running on black and white only, so there was no footage whatsoever from that event, to give you some idea. But then anyway, Jo came on board and we began, whenever she had some time, she's very busy because she runs this very, lively and busy community support, action, political, world domination event in Tyrone. It's kind of, it's a sort of a matrix for the way that society could work politically if you were intelligent and sensible. And it now supports migrant people, disabled people, community groups, cross-culturally, cross-community. It's a great organisation. It started with 8, as you saw there, and now there are 32. And she goes fundraising and runs conferences and just absolutely incredible,
Okay, how long did it take to edit?
2 years. Not all the time.
No.
I didn't have any money at the beginning, and when T.G. Carr came on board, he enabled me to look for money to pay an editor. Nobody else was paid. And the archive and the editing is what took up all the money, about 100,000.
The archive?
The archive cost about 40,000 for very limited licenses. And it's one of the capitalist disgraces, but I won't go on about it here. It's just the expropriation of people's lives and people's work and a whole lot of things like that. I wanted to name all the cameramen who had been involved because they put themselves into real danger, many of them. Excuse me, there was a great RTE cameraman called Gay O'Brien, and he was the one who shot that 5th of October, the early stuff where she is saying, that's what the police were there to do, and that made me angry. And that is a kind of paraphrase, but Gay used to bring a set of steps on these demonstrations, and so he could get up above the crowds and in that way see what was actually going on.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Any questions? I see. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Lelia, just how does Bernadette feel about the film? She's seen it. Is she happy?
Yeah, well the whole deal was I wouldn't finish it or show it until she was content that it represented, it's obviously it's not her decision on every occasion. In 1 or 2 places, we had this discussion this afternoon, we had a difference of opinion, and on 1 or 2 occasions I said no, and on 1 or 2 occasions I said yes, okay, you do have a point. So yes, at the end of all, that was the agreement. I have total editorial control, but she has an input. It's her life. Yeah. It's a portrait of her life, and some of her life. It's only a small fragment, But yeah, that's it.
I'd like to have been a fly on the wall in that cutting room sense. Yes.
Have you shown it in Ireland, and if so, what impact has it had? What have audiences said about it?
I understand that you were responding and laughing, and I've had that response in Ireland. It started on the Galway Film Fleadh last July, and then it came to London, to the film festival, and then it went back and it had a week's run in the Irish Film Centre in Dublin. It went to the Cork Film Festival, it's been to Derry, it had a week's run in Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast, and it's generally been audiences who have appreciated, and there have been some questions. This afternoon I had one about whether or not in fact it was a criticism or a question raised about whether or not there should have been a more critical view of the way in which Bernadette, in her persona and actions and ideas, was in a sense, created the hatreds that loyalists felt for Fenians. And in 1 or 2 occasions on one occasion, there was a question as to whether or not we should have had a more balanced picture by having other commentators apart from her make their views known about. But I had always decided it was only going to be her voice, her life, except where contemporary issues were raised by people in those situations. So there may be some people who want to, you know, make comment on the absence of any attack on her as a Fenian terrorist, which some, you know, people regarded her as being. But I think anyone to whom I've spoken and who had an opportunity to sit down and either read her book or look at the only other film that was made, which was some parts of which I have used, especially the Battle of the Bogside piece by a man called John Goldschmidt, who followed her from the time that she was elected as an MP for the first time and went around with her and was there during the time of the Bogside. There has never been any other piece of film about her or any other piece of writing, except certain vilifications, cartoons, and those kinds of things, apart from her own writings, which have been few and far between, essays mostly about the peace process, some articles in the newspapers, and therefore, you know, I feel that she was never a terrorist. She was always a woman who preferred politics to militarism and tried to pursue that path in great difficulty and with a lot of humour.
We have another question over here, but can I just ask, when you say you showed it in different places, was there a different reaction in Belfast to Derry? Everybody
No,
was
strangely enough, the laughs are all in the same place. I'm sorry I didn't get him by the throat, being one of the main ones. Yeah, I kind of feel there's a quality that I believe she has, which is she is without bitterness. She is insightful and humorous and wise in a strange, interesting way. And she has principles which I think an awful lot of people would absolutely espouse and support, you know. A republic which means an egalitarian system of life for the people in the citizenry in a state or a nation, and a socialist way of distributing the wealth that is made by those in it. Well, you might say it's pie in the sky and that she's very naive, and doubtless in certain respects indeed she is. But she's still doing it.
What influence was her husband in terms of her life and work?
I think you'd want to ask her that. Michael is very, very much alive, very much there. Bernadette would say, I'm a happily married woman. She's a grandmother. She has 3 children, and she's a granny a number of times over. What can I say? I didn't make a film about her. I didn't set out to make a film about her personal life or her private life. I set out to do something else. And it was necessary, though, I felt, I don't know if you'd agree, to set the early days, to create the sort of context and the framework within which you could see how she became intellectually and emotionally the kind of person that she is. Does somebody here?
Yes. I'd just like to say thanks very much for putting a woman's perspective, for having grown up in Belfast. I was surrounded by loads of strong women and watched Bernadette Devlin on TV, and it's just so brilliant to see something like that, because as usual we're erased from the history and the involvement, and the women were the powerhouse during that time.
Yes.
Personal experience it was.
This lady, I don't know if you've all heard, was just saying that she enjoyed and appreciated the feminist viewpoint and the fact that a woman of her quality and stature was there, in a sense, for all the women, because she never would have said, you know, she says, we were brought up to believe that no one is better than we are, and no one is worse. And she also said, there were a whole lot of other things about feminism and her attitude to the way in which the women in the struggle were treated that I couldn't use. There just wasn't enough time. But she does say at one point that the men were still lounging along the walls and the women were still cooking 3 square meals a day, you know. That was what was happening during the revolution.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
I wondered if the result of the Savile inquiry came too late for your film, or whether Bernadette had any comment to make on the outcome of that trial and of that inquiry.
Yes, there is a card which says that 40 years later,
Yeah.
David Cameron admitted.
Did Bernadette comment on the outcome of the inquiry?
She did publicly in the newspapers, and she said that she felt that the squaddies were the ones who had been landed in it, rather than the government taking responsibility for what had been done. She said that in a piece in one of the newspapers. But I think, on reflection, I can't put words in her mouth, but she might agree that there was an implication that the government was complicit, in that day's work.
Next week, Lelia is going to be in Beirut showing this film. Isn't that extraordinary? Because I think everyone here, most of the people here tonight are personally involved and remember Bernadette was indeed Idec. And I think it's really interesting that actually she is about more than just that conflict. She is about what's happening in an awful lot of places in the world today, and that film has great relevance for a larger audience than just in the UK. So I just like to say thank you to Lelia for being here and for letting us show the film, and I hope it has seen by a lot of people.